Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. We'll be discussing water stewardship and partnerships for water security at a catchment scale. We've got a variety of people on the line today, including IPECA members and some guests from NGO backgrounds. So a huge welcome to all of you and thanks very much for joining this discussion. My name is Anna Gray. I'm the Environment Coordinator for IPECA, and I'm just going to briefly introduce our speakers today and then run through some technical logistics. So our first speaker today will be Jan Verwaayen. Jan is the private sector liaison officer of the IWASP team and supports the development of business cases for corporate water stewardship engagement. He brings 10 years of experience in corporate finance and impact investing, having worked for Deutsche Bank, among others. We'll then hear from Godfrey Lugwago, who is Total EMP Uganda's Social Investment and Education Officer. He has worked for over 12 years in the NGO and business sectors, of which 4 years have been with Total. He coordinates a portfolio of projects focusing on improving access to water, education, health and energy within the company's license area. Godfrey's current job assignments involve building public-private partnerships so as to improve the social performance portfolio of the affiliate. Next, Richard Boak. Richard is currently Water Resources Manager for Tullow, Kenya. He is a hydrogeologist by profession, specializing in water resources development and management. Richard has 35 years of international experience with a strong focus on Africa. Finally, Anne-Marie Ran. Anne-Marie leads the IWASP team in Kenya since inception and initiated several partnerships in the country involving private sector and local communities while working with government institutions. She brings 20 years of experience in West and East Africa in the field of natural resources management and rural development. In the webinar today, we'll be hearing an overview of GIZ's work through the IWASP program and then some case study examples from oil and gas companies. We will finish with a Q&A session. So before I hand over to Jan, I'll quickly run through some technical logistics. Everyone is currently on mute. During the Q&A session, you can either raise your hand via the WebEx system to indicate that you would like to ask a question or make a comment, after which I will unmute you, or you can type a question into the dialog box. You can either send a question to all participants, just to myself or the other presenters. I will then read these out during the Q&A. Please note that we will ask all participants to complete a post-webinar survey today on water stewardship so we can understand areas of interest for further information. So now that that's all been said, I can hand over to Jan for the presentation.
Thank you, Anna, and a warm welcome to everybody from GIZ. I'm speaking to you today from our headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany, and I'm excited that we have such a strong presenting team with already 2 companies from the IPECA member circle who can present to you life experience on using water stewardship to tackle water risks in their operations. Without further ado, I would like to give you a brief overview of GIZ. Not everybody might be familiar with the organization and then with the program in general, so you know a bit of the framework and background. So bear with me, just 4 slides until we get to the case study. As you can see here, obviously GIZ is a development agency of the German government. We have an annual budget of about 2 billion in contracts, and we use about 16,000 employees in 130 countries around the world. Most of these countries we actually have been for a rather long time, we feel, and one of the strongholds in our implementation work on the ground is working in water. One of the very basics of what we do is really working with governments and helping to strengthen government. So that is, if you wish, so our bread and butter business. But we also have quite some experience cooperating with companies of very different sizes and styles. It is mostly in the area, I guess from a company's perspective, of risk management. And as there are specialists for each type of risk, I think we feel confident that we can deliver and contribute to in the areas of societal and environmental risks. The mode this will take, and I'm on the right part of this slide, is mostly that we're working as a middleman, helping to facilitate cooperation with civil society or governments, and how this works for water security and the International Water Stewardship Program, where I'm part of, I will get to in a minute. Before that, I just wanted to highlight on the next slide that there are already quite a number of initiatives where we cooperate with some of the members, and I assume some of these companies are also on the call here today. The two countries highlighted is where we already have work in the water sector, which you will hear more from your colleagues in a few minutes. But I think there's, looking at the water challenge in general and the increasing climate variability, there's obviously room to increase this. Now, before we get into the specifics of the case studies, a bit of a background on the program itself. On the left-hand side, you see a few basic facts. So we have our own funding for funding our own teams, etc. So that's about 26 million, mostly from the British government. We're still running until 2019 with the current funding, and likely will continue thereafter as well. So far, we're present in 9 countries, 7 of them in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa, Zambia, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Pakistan. And so far, in the first half, so to say, of our program duration, we have set up more than 20 formalized partnerships with about an equal number of corporations and public institutions and a couple of NGOs. Similar to companies, our program is guided by clear performance targets. So by the end of 2019, we aim to have reached more than 1 million beneficiaries, and like here you see Farida from Uganda. And we have obviously a strong focus on poverty alleviation through our program and targeting vulnerable groups. In doing so, we aim to leverage another 10 million euros from corporates and to a lesser degree of about 2 million euros also from public institutions. And no less important, we're very cognizant, we're active in a public arena, so we really want to strengthen the public sector and the public sector institutions, and we have also KPIs for this. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see a schematic overview of what basically we understand with water stewardship. So this is really focusing on addressing water risks which lie outside of the fence line of any individual actor. And typically, where we get active, some of these actors, be it the companies, be it the civil society, or even the government, they're already active, but very seldom they're speaking to each other. So these actions are mostly not aligned. And our role then is typically to come in more as a conductor to help streamline the efforts and make sure that everybody is on the same boat. We do so, now moving to the lower part of the right-hand side on the slide, and really looking, especially for companies, how the water risks relate to their core operations, and think about what these risks mean in terms of revenues and costs, and to help facilitate a business case, and not only do this with the companies, but also obviously with the public entities as well, looking at their business case as well. What we then strive towards is to leave lasting and sustainable change, be that physical, i.e. think of infrastructure, or behavioral awareness campaigns, change in habits, or institutional, the strengthening of public sector institutions, as already mentioned. On the last slide, before we get to the case studies, I would just like to give you a bit of an overview, and won't go into all the details here. Obviously, water risk can be separated into water stress and water governance. And on water stress, you can subdivide further into too much water, too little water, no access to water, or the problem with water quality. What you can see here below are the typical interventions we have seen, and then further below you see the individual partnerships which we have set up. I would like to highlight here that obviously you see partnerships addressing various different challenges, so that is something we see is really common. And we see also that some of the same measures being replicated across partnerships. And so far, I think we've gained quite some good experience in customizing the approach to the very individual setting of the water individual watershed in question. Now, without further ado, I would like now to hand over to Godfrey from Total in Uganda.
Hello, good afternoon everyone from Kampala. This is Godfrey here with Jackie. I'll just take you through briefly what we have been able to do with GIZ within our license area in the midwestern part of Uganda. For the starters, Total has a business. It actually has two businesses in Uganda, but I come from the branch that does exploration and production. And we are the licensed operators of Exploration Area 1 and EA1 in Uganda. These license areas are on the lake, a lake called Lake Albert, which we share with the Democratic Republic of Congo, as you can see on the map on the right-hand side. We have a joint venture partnership together with Tullow Oil and Sinopec, which is a Chinese company. Each of us has got a 33% stake in investment for the 3 blocks, as you can see in the map. There are 3 blocks. We operate block 1, Tullow operates block 2, and Sinopec, a Chinese firm, operates block 3 further down. As of August 2016, we were given 25 years production licenses, and this will help us develop this resource. We also, as of April this year, we were able to finalize together with the 3 or 5 governments of East Africa on an oil pipeline route. This is the East African oil pipeline route, port pipeline. And this pipeline will come from Uganda and will go all the way to Tanga Port in Tanzania. The ambition is that the other East African partners or countries can actually utilize this pipeline in future. Key for us as a business in Uganda is that we expect to have the final investment decision made by the end of 2017. Therefore, we'll be able to develop the resource, get an EPC contractor, and do all that starting in 2018. The Bolisa Water Stewardship Partnership, which we have implemented with GIZ, the government of Uganda, Bolisa District Local Government, our implementing partners, that is Joint Efforts to Save the Environment and Community Integrated Development Initiative, had a particular overall goal that was to make sure that we can have an improvement on the water point functionality, water resource management structures, for improved livelihoods for communities within the 2 sub-counties, that is in Ngwedo and Chigwera in Bolisa. Our license area is mainly covering those two sub-counties within Bolisa, and then we also have another district across. The partners, as I've told you, are those in there. We initially had a 1-year partnership that was between January and December 2016, and we have spent both in kind and cash about 100,000 euros. Why have we taken up water stewardship within Uganda as an oil and gas company? One is that increasingly we have noticed that we need to establish strategic partnerships, that is both private and public, so as to leverage on the resources that are available. It's not a good time for the oil and gas business, and our managements are not willing to give us as much in terms of resources as it was in the past. So if we can get strategic partners with the resources that we have, we can actually do quite a lot more. And IOWAS is one of those that we have been able to identify and work with within this area. So the company is also keen especially on developing an oil and gas project that is sustainable and efficient within Uganda. And this is evidenced by the fact that we already started this partnership. Actually, the negotiations with Iowa started in 2015, and we actually actualized in this relationship in 2016. However, it shows that even before that we had a future about the business, that was on our side, having a pipeline route where we actually send the crude off to the international market. Before we even had production licenses from the government, we already showed commitment towards developing water stewardship and enhancing the water resources within our license area. And as you are aware, water is a very integral part of the oil and gas business. We are huge guzzlers of water within the business, and for us it makes business sense to actually invest in water stewardship, as it were. And we're also looking at going beyond the legal requirements internally within the country. As you might be aware, maybe not, the project that we are developing is going to actually take water out of the Lake Albert. And we also use some other groundwater for domestic and other use. But on our side, we are actually saying that we'll go beyond just, the water abstraction from the lake and all the other points to actually make sure that these resources, the water resources, are being used sustainably. Also on our side, we want to contribute, we want to be one of the actors that will contribute to the Sustainable Development Goal number 6 of the United Nations, but also have a social license to operate within our license area, especially where we are dealing with communities on a day-to-day basis. So this is quite critical for us. What have we been through the last so many months, maybe even beyond a year now with IOWAS? One is that we looked at what we need to prepare, we assessed the context, we also got to a point where we made a commitment, we also acted, and now the point of discussion is what is a possible scale-up of the intervention. This is a bit of a detailed slide. We can have Anna and the rest of the IPCA team share it with you as the participants. But for us, it was a critical part to actually go through the phases to make sure that we have thought through this relationship thoroughly, and that we can actually have key indicators to monitor it. We thought through the risks, and we've also thought through the milestones, what are we expecting as outputs, but also what are the tangible activities that we can actually do together. So what have we been able to achieve in the last 11 months? One is, as you can see in the pictures there, we've been able to actually set up animal water traps for the communities. We've also rehabilitated boreholes within this license area. And the animal water traps, as you can see, the animals have been taking water from a flooded place, which has been creating a lot of issues in terms of animal health, but also the human health. And now the water is collected, and the animals don't have to take the water from a flooded area. So this is one of the interventions that we've done together with IOWAS. We've also gone ahead and actually strengthened community structures that are geared towards ensuring functionality of the water sources. And one of them has been setting up village banks around the water points that we have worked with for this period of time. We've also strengthened the Hand Pump Mechanic Association. This association is a group of individuals with technical skills that actually go and repair the water points as and when they break down. Really, the aim was to make sure that operation and maintenance happens through it all in a more sustainable way. The next thing that we've been able to do has been sanitation awareness at a secondary school. We've set up a sanitation and hygiene club at that school within our license area. This school is the oldest secondary school. It was started in the 1960s, and it has quite a lot in terms of influence, and we thought that we could actually have an intervention at the school. We've also been able to set up a particular sanitation facility for the girls because they didn't have one within the area. We've also been able to, Sambie, we have a river within the area called Sambie, and we've been able to actually establish but also strengthen the committee within that area, a watershed management committee. And what you're seeing here are actually the committee actually coming up with action plans and ways to actually see that this catchment, the Sambie, is actually preserved in that regard. So again, this is the river, as you can see in green. It has a lot of wetland around it, and people have actually gone and degraded it. So we've actually done an analysis of what are the degraded points. People are burning charcoal for commercial activities. Part of it has also been farmed, and then the other part has been lightly grazed by the cattle keepers. So what we have done together with them is map out these areas and also identify particular spots. We've done about 90 hectares, which we have cornered off, fenced off, and actually allowed it to regenerate. And also agreed with communities they have come up with livelihood restoration activity, livelihood activities, alternative livelihood activities that they can actually undertake instead of going and degrading this particular watershed. So what has been the key learnings on our side? One, partnership is very key, especially that you can pool resources and actually have a bigger impact. If it was only Total with a few resources at the time, we will not have as much impact as when we had another actor actually coming in to intervene in that regard. So it's key to actually have partnerships so that you can neutralize on the resources that you have. The other has been joint planning, information sharing, and feedback. This has been quite key within a partnership context, because there's a lot that can actually be done when you actually do things together. A case in point, the secondary school where we went and actually had this intervention, we actually, together with the GIZ implementing partner, actually had the same hygiene and sanitation club coming and sitting and looking after the woodlot that the other implementing partner has been looking after. So the GIZ implementing partner does not have to worry about the condition of the woodlot because this club that has been set up is actually helping to actually look after it. So those are some of the things that you can actually leverage on when you do joint planning, information sharing, feedback in that regard. Joint monitoring has also been quite key for us. We have done joint monitoring visits where we've gone to both the Total implementing partner and the GIZ implementing partner areas, and we've actually learned quite a lot during that period of time. Then partnerships to improve, especially relationships among actors. Some of these actors, it's the first time we were working with them jointly within a network, but we've seen that this actually brings a lot in terms of benefit, both the private sector, the public, civil society, but also the beneficiary communities within this area. So community sensitization, the last has been community sensitization, participation, and capacity building is quite critical, especially if we want to look out for impact in cases, especially where we are setting up new interventions such as this. So really that has been the learning on our side. At this juncture, I will hand over to my colleague Richard, who will also give us a brief about what is happening in Kenya in this regard. Thank you very much.
Hello, this is Richard calling from Nairobi. Alongside me is Anna Marie. We're having technical problems with the line in Nairobi. Perhaps Anna could just confirm that you can hear me.
We can hear you, yes. Thanks, Richard.
Okay, good. I'll carry on. Together with Anna Marie from GIZ, we're going to present a case study which is about a catchment partnership that's being set up between GIZ, Tullow, and the Water Resources Management Authority, which is a government body connected with the catchment of the River Turkwell, which you can see on the map there. In Kenya, Tullow is operating 3 blocks jointly with Africa Oil and Maersk. And the blocks in question are 10BA, 13T, and 10BB on the map, which you can see on the map in front of you. The area shown on the map is the northwestern corner of Kenya, and you can see Lake Turkana as a big blue area running north to south. The Turkwell River is marked, and where I've indicated Mount Elgon, that's pretty much the source of the Turkwell River. So if you trace the river down from Mount Elgon to Lake Turkana, you can see that the Turkwell catchment coincides really well with most of our operational area in the 3 blocks that I've just described. This area has got very many challenges. In the whole of the northwest Kenya is an area of water scarcity, classed as arid and semi-arid. There are big international transboundary impacts that we have to take into account. The majority of the inflow to Lake Turkana comes from the Omo River, which is entirely within Ethiopia, and that provides about 95% of the inflow. So the Turkwell River is a relatively small input to the lake. But despite that, there are many competing demands for the water resources of the Turkwell catchment, including big plans for irrigation, more hydropower, and increasing domestic water consumption as the population grows in the area. There's very poor coverage of water supply and sanitation generally, and problems of catchment degradation through deforestation, cutting trees down for charcoal making typically, and general unsustainable use of natural resources. So with all those challenges, and given the overlap between the Turkwell catchment and Tullow's area of operations, it's greatly in our interest to be involved in a partnership that is looking at the managing the water resources of the Turkwell River. Just to give you an idea of the quantities involved, we're just coming to the end of the exploration and appraisal phase in those licensed blocks, and during the exploration and appraisal activities, the maximum demand so far has been about 900 cubic meters a day. And those pictures on the right show the main uses of the water for field camps, civil engineering, community water, and drilling, and I've indicated a rough breakdown of the quantities there. Activities have slowed down just lately, so our current demand is about 430 cubic meters a day. So far, all this water is supplied from a network of local boreholes that we've drilled ourselves, and with the cooperation of WERMA, as I said, that's the Water Resources Management Authority, the government body that issues permits. We're also looking ahead to the development and production phases, and much larger quantities of water will be required over the lifetime of the oil field. And I've put in red there, no water, no oil, because this water is essential for injection into the oil reservoir because of the characteristics of the reservoirs. And we estimate, based on, it obviously depends on the oil production scenarios, but we estimate a typical average demand of just over 7,000 cubic meters a day with a peak of 24,000 cubic meters a day. That includes our needs, plus building extra capacity into the system to cope with, to enhance local community water supplies. We've been studying the hydrology and the hydrogeology of the Turkwell catchment intensively, and an important stage in the process will be for us to agree with the government of Kenya where we'll get the water for the much larger quantities during the development and production phases. I'm going to hand over to Anna-Marie now, and she will tell you more about the partnership.
So hi, good day, good afternoon, or good morning as well from my side. I will have 3 slides about the partnership setup and the interest of the different partners in joining this partnership. Actually, it's a very young partnership. We are in the initial stages. We started in the second quarter of 2016, and it started with a discussion between the Water Resource Management Authority and Tullow Oil about the availability of data for the sustainable management of the water resources in the catchment area, and that is where we joined the discussion. So we had a first meeting in the north of Kenya with a larger group of stakeholders, so more than the 3 partners setting up the partnership at the moment, but we discussed with a couple of stakeholders from the government, civil society, stakeholders about the problems everybody is facing related to water resource management, availability, water quality, etc., followed by a couple of other meetings where the interested partners came together, and now the stage we are in is we have developed together an action plan for the coming years, and we are formalizing the final agreements between the Water Resource Management Authority, GIZ, IWASP, and Tullow Oil about the commitment of resources for the coming year. So that is the stage we are in at the moment. So going to the slides, one back, Richard. Sorry. So the interest of the government, of the Water Resource Management Authority, if they would really like to see an improved water allocation planning and the enforcement of the regulation. As Richard mentioned, there are a couple of developments going on in the whole catchment area that might endanger enough water for domestic and economic use in the long term. They would like to improve their hydromet monitoring, and they would like to see strong local water resource management institutions on the ground. The civil society and the communities are represented by this .org bullet point, let's say. These are the water resource user associations. These are local voluntary groups organized around smaller catchment areas, and they are responsible for the sustainable management of their own areas. They would like to see also long-term water availability, of good water quality, of course, and a sustainable management of the water resources. Richard already mentioned the interest of Tullow as a partner, risk mitigation, of course, reputation and regulatory risk. Due to the lack of reliable hydromet data, it's difficult to plan on long term, so they have an interest there to improve the monitoring system, and of course the relation with the communities and support of water-related community projects. IWASP comes in for capacity building of the authority and of the local stakeholders, the local groups on the ground, setting up a sustainable multi-stakeholder partnership, and we hope that it will continue even if we will withdraw, and of course stimulate the implementation of the work plan that we formulated all together. This slide shows the focus of our activities in 2017. We decided to go ahead with the 3 partners that were able to commit resources for 2017. So these activities will be focused in a smaller area of the catchment. It's a really big catchment area, so we have to make a choice and focus geographically. So we will start in the upper part of the catchment area, where we can probably easily start working with the water resource user associations that are already organized, and that we can show at least some good practices and case studies to the other partners as well that we would like to get on board later on. So one of the most important areas is, of course, the improvement of the hydromet monitoring situation. You can see the picture on the left upper part of the slide. This is a typical situation now on the ground, and of course you can't get reliable data from these kind of monitoring stations. With the water resource user associations, we would like to focus on catchment rehabilitation. This is an example from another area, but of course here as well, as Richard mentioned, catchment degradation is a big issue, so we would like to work on that one with the partners. Water allocation planning is of crucial importance to secure water on the long term as well for the different communities and private sector. Capacity building, I mentioned that one, and of course the setup of the partnership. My last slide, if it goes, yes. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we had these first stakeholder meetings with a bigger group than the 3 partners that will be signing an agreement for the coming year. These partners were not able, as for now, to commit on paper to join the partnership, but they are very much interested. We didn't want, however, to wait until everybody who is interested could commit on paper. So we said, okay, let's kickstart the whole process off with the partners who can do this. We will keep inviting the people, the institutions and the potential partners you see on this slide in the coordination meetings. We are planning to do that maybe every 3 months, at least to keep everybody on board, to mobilize more interest, to mobilize more resources, and to secure more funding and commitment and involvement for the period after 2017, of course. And also to be able to implement the program in a larger area than we are able to do now. So I will stop here. I will hand over to Jan again for some slides on next steps and some more information on IWASP.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. Thank you, Richard and Godfrey. I think it was really valuable insights. I won't keep much longer until we have a Q&A. Just a few more slides. I thought it might be helpful to get a bit of a perspective to wrap this up and also see of how can you access this and what would be the steps required. On the next slide, this is the Water Risk Connection Framework is a bit like a toolbox which we developed based on the experience with all the different water stewardship partnerships. Now you have heard of 2, and so there's about 18 more which we have so far, and we're obviously busy setting up more of these. What we would like to highlight here, it's not necessarily a straight line in the development from the partnership creation to execution of measures, but typically there are certain phases which have specific characteristics. So arguably, one could say that the partnership in Watalao in Kenya is probably in the prepare and assess phase. They have identified the stakeholders. You just saw all these different logos. They already started sharing the problems and recognize each other's interests. And also, obviously, they have prepared a roadmap how to go forward. And then you come into an assess phase where you need to kind of lay the land and agree on common data, etc. And then let me jump to maybe the act phase. That is certainly something where Total in Uganda has already been, and they're now looking actually to scale up. What we have developed is a number of tools, so documents, processes, obviously there's contacts for experts, etc. And this will also be made available online and publicly via the CEO Water Mandate website until next year. So this is a bit how these partnerships can work and what is helpful to make them work. On the next slide, you can see a global map of the water stewardship activities GIZ is involved with. Now you will recognize that this goes beyond the water stewardship program, which we are representing here. So there's even activities outside of this. What I'd like to highlight is that we're working across geographies in very different circumstances, whether it's arid or flood-prone areas. And whether it's retail consumer-facing companies or B2B, big infrastructure-like companies, as in the extractive industries, so we're probably quite attuned at customizing our approach to the individual circumstances and making sure that the partnership actually can come up with really useful solutions. Now there's a few more slides which are more targeted at how can you become involved, what is required. So on the one hand side, when we consider new partnerships, there's a set of criteria which we obviously like to see. So I think it goes without saying that it's important to have a joint focus on water stewardship. What this really means is that you would be, as a company, willing to consider also addressing risks which, at least to some degree, lie outside of your premises, and also which would be shared by other actors. The other thing, we can only move forward if all the partners in a partnership have resources available. That is not only financial resources to pay for the measures the partnership agrees on eventually to implement, but also human resources, the likes of Godfrey and Richard to be present here, but most importantly to be present in the partnership meetings and help the partnership to move along. A strong focus for us is also on beneficiaries, and I've highlighted this earlier. So we will always be looking and then also measuring and monitoring how many people did we reach and what were the benefits they have now, and how is the water security improved for local communities and their members. We'll do a normal kind of reputational risk screening, as you probably do as well with any party you engage with. And then also important to note, we're present now in 9 countries, most of them in Africa, but principally we can become active anywhere in the world. That will take a bit different form, and it is probably easiest to start discussions where we're already present with the program directly. How does this all relate to the oil and gas industry and the development cycle? In principle, water stewardship partnerships can be quite flexible, and they can be set up at any stage of the development cycle. However, from our experience so far, we're quite convinced that it does make sense to actually start early, so to reap the maximum benefits, especially in strengthening your relationship with communities, with the local administration, and also avoiding maybe some of the pitfalls of others, and using the experience of somebody who has actually done it and been there before. The roles and commitments obviously vary with the individual partnership setting, but what is the constant is that it is required to have a long-term commitment to the river basin, as these partnerships take time to develop and to be set up and to come to fruition. And to really approach them with a collaborative mindset. So different to the normal, I think, mode of companies, this isn't about competing with each other. What we really cherish is that actually in most of the partnerships, we have been successful in moving to also include corporate functions as well as operations people. So I think these partnerships can become more sustainable the more buy-in there is from people and from also budgets and operations, the better they relate to the core business risks and can address these. And I've already touched upon the contributions, maybe just to give you a bit of guidance. So the contribution from Total in Uganda was mentioned with 100,000 all-in cash and in kind, and this is something, I guess, typical on where most partnerships start. We have ourselves some funding, which is in similar amounts, and then partners funding really depends mostly also on the measures to be executed, and we've seen contributions up into about $1 million or so. So it's so far not really focused on big infrastructure spending, which obviously would have different figures. Now, my last slide, I would like to highlight a few aspects where I think they can be really of benefit for you and any company working with a program like I was when the GIZ. I think, for one, certainly is the long-standing and dependable government relationships. You would probably appreciate to understand that my colleague Anna-Marie and others, they're actually sitting within the ministry, not directly sharing the desk with ministers, but they're really close and also have colleagues in the local areas and local offices who are much closer to the local administration. That really pays off, especially in making sure that our measures have sustainable impact. And then time and again, it has been proven that a trust and honest broker, so somebody active in between also the different stakeholders, can be really valuable, especially when setting up these multi-stakeholder partnerships in remote locations. And then what is helpful there is our local operations and obviously our experience from the partnerships elsewhere and maybe even in the same country already or in the same industry in a different country. And what this really helps with is also leveraging third-party resources. So think of other companies who might be active in the same water catchment or government entities or government pockets of funding, which maybe the local administration doesn't know how to access, etc. Now, without any further, we would go and move on to the Q&A, but just wanted to highlight again that you would be really helpful in supporting us if you could fill out this feedback survey. It's only, I think, 4 questions, so probably won't take you more than a minute, and that would really help us because I would be contributing to our KPIs in terms of making water stewardship more knowledgeable and accessible to different kinds of communities and people. Thank you.
Jan and all our speakers, thanks very much. That's some great presentations there and really useful to hear from you all. So as Jan said, we've now opened up for the Q&A. Please send in your questions and we can put them to our speakers today. But whilst you're all thinking and typing, I'll start us off. Please feel free, speakers, to chip in on this one. I was just wondering if any of you have any initial top tips for taking a watershed approach in a region. Jan, maybe you could start us off?
Sure. I think what is important to recognize is that oftentimes, obviously, the boundaries of administration and watersheds that don't really overlap, so there is already there a potential for conflict. And the other thing I notice often, it is a really local challenge. But then if you get the local actors to come together and actually talk to each other, which surprisingly in many of the instances hasn't really happened before, then there's a good chance, there's good surprise that already somebody else is active, somebody else already has funding, or the government had already thought about doing something. But I'd hope for actually some contribution from the countries because they're much closer. Sitting here in Germany, I'm a bit remote and feel unprepared to go into further detail.
Yeah, this is Richard. If you can hear me, my top tip would be, make sure, Jan's already mentioned getting the stakeholders together. I would reinforce that. And there's a big problem with key stakeholders not making their own plans without taking the effect on other stakeholders into account. I'm thinking, I mentioned in my presentation about irrigation plans. You know, it's very easy to set irrigation targets at a national level in terms of number of hectares that they need to be constructed without necessarily taking into account the availability of the water or development plans that other parts of government or even non-government organisations want to do, such as, you know, increasing urban development in certain places or encouraging business or industries Anna-Marie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important for us, and we had some discussion here internally on this, is really go where the energy is already, and don't wait until everybody really comes on board with clear commitments, etc. This is one of the reasons why we said, okay, let's start at least with a smaller group of stakeholders that can kickstart the whole process off, continue communicating to the larger stakeholder groups. We are also planning to have more bilateral meetings with decision makers in the catchment areas, with governors, for instance, of the counties, etc., that we're not capable or willing at the moment to commit to the partnership. But we think if we start working on water allocation planning and resources, data management, etc., and we can showcase some of the good practices in the course of next year, that other people will come on board finally. So yeah, rather start where the energy is with a small group of people that can commit. Don't forget the other stakeholders. Keep them on board the whole time, also during meetings, what we are trying to do. And then hope that the others, due to the good practices and really seeing that something is being done instead of talking the whole time, that we will be able to extend the partnership with more people, and that we can tackle a bigger area. Yeah, that would be my take, I think.
Brilliant, thanks all. So, go on, Godfrey, yes, thanks.
Yes, on my side, I would just say one thing. For us, the learning around this has been that, you know, working with existing Ministry of Water established structures has been quite key for us. And when we went and actually revived the structure at that level, we've actually discovered that the ministry has actually even set aside resources to actually, next financial year, actually come and further strengthen it. And strengthen it. So in terms of sustainability, it's key for us, for the watershed committees, to actually go and use the existing government structures. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Urs. I'm hearing be proactive, reach out early, and be adaptive. So some good tips there. I've got two questions relating to exit strategies from some people on the line. So I think I'm going to read out both. And then hand them over to the speakers. So Bruce Hayes asks, successful exit strategies that ensure sustained water programs are very dependent on the development and retention of local leadership. What focus are you providing to developing this local leadership? And Dawn Coughlin asks, do you have any challenges with managing expectations among local and government entities in ensuring that initiatives are self-sustainable and can be managed after the industry exits the area? How are those challenges addressed? So quite wordy questions there, but does anyone have any thoughts? And thanks both for those questions.
Okay, Anna, I think we are on now. We could answer maybe the question that Bruce has.
Great.
I mean, it's a super relevant question, and of course we are looking at this as well. Also, I mean, the oil industry invests for 25 years, of course, huh? So you have to think long-term anyway. Here in Kenya, it's the Water Resource Management Authority who is responsible, who has the legal mandate and all the laws in place, etc., and the strategies for the sustainable management of water resources at catchment level. This is why they are key for us to be in the program, in the partnership as from the beginning. So we are working with the headquarters of WARMA here in Nairobi, because they are responsible finally for the final oversight, and that trickles down through the regional and sub-regional offices. So we are definitely a lot of energy is put into place to make sure that they are on board, that their capacities are being, you know, enhanced. We are doing capacity building of the different officers, involving them in exchange programs, field visits, etc. And then so we are trying to anchor definitely all the work that we are doing and all the legal requirements, etc., within the authority. And another thing is that the setup of this partnership is really, with all the stakeholders on board, we have the vision that we could have a sustainable partnership even after I was is gone, that the local stakeholders will still continue meeting on a catchment level to be able to support the sustainable management of the water resources. So it's really anchoring all the experiences and enhancing capacity of the stakeholder that has the legal mandate here in Kenya. I don't know, Richard, if you would like to add something on this.
Just to add that within that structure, there is a type of local community organisation called a Water Resources User Association.
Yeah.
And those are being set up in key areas, and they're made up by members of the community and local water users. And they're fully involved in the process, and they will eventually be responsible for making decisions for how water resources are used within their area of responsibility. Back to you, Anna.
Great, thanks both. Godfrey and Jackie, did you have anything to add on this? If not, I do have another question.
Yes, just briefly from our side. Good afternoon, everyone. I haven't spoken yet. My name is Jackie Lehman. I work as a technical advisor for GIEZ at IWASP here in Uganda, and I'm sitting here with Godfrey. And just to briefly really emphasize what Anna-Marie and Richard have already said, I think, you know, especially when it, and go to the other question a bit of, you know, managing expectations, I think this is why we employ a very solid sensitization and engagement strategy, actually. You know, we do a lot of work with the communities. We make sure that they understand why we're doing what we're doing and what they can expect from us, but also, you know, what is expected from them in a way. And, you know, without the collaboration of the communities, you're not going to go very far. And I think, again, to reiterate what Anna-Marie has said, it's very important to get the government on board as early as you can and make sure, and this is what, you know, GIEZ's expertise really is, making sure that whatever we do and whatever we plan is in line with government priorities as well. And that will ensure the sustainability of the intervention, because as long as you work in line with what the government priorities are, they kind of ensure that that will be carried over. And I think another aspect of, you know, ensuring sustainability is kind of to institute these committees, as you mentioned. I think they're a bit different in Kenya from the ones here in Uganda, but, you know, the watershed committees that we set up, again, you know, really take the time to make them understand what their mandate is, what their role is, and what, you know, how important they are, because those committees and those, you know, groups of people are hugely important for the future of that area. Godfrey, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
I think it has all been said on our side. That's exactly what would promote and the way we would actually transact our business and this intervention per se. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks all. So we've got 3 minutes left, so I've got one last very quick question, and then I'll take a minute at the end to close out. So this question is again probably directed at the Total and Tullow representatives we have. What, if any, are the challenges you have faced in communicating the business case for this work to higher management, and how have you overcome these? And that's from Amy Collins.
Okay. On our side, every time we have engaged our top management in this regard, I think two things have stood out. One is the industry is not well, it is not doing so well at the time. Therefore, they are not willing to commit as much money as possible. Then two, we've also been told that they will only give us a budget annually. So we can't think about a 5-year program, a 7-year program per se, though we know for now that we've been in that license area for about for the next 25 years. So that has been a bit of our challenge. The approved budget is only for 1 year, and you're always reminded about the fact that, you know, the price of oil is not getting up, is not getting any better. That has been the challenge. But how have we overcome that? I think it is the commitment, the fact that the company really globally is committed to actually access to water. So on our side, we've always gone back and told them that the business is committed to actually access to water within the areas that we work in. So that is pretty much what has been happening on our side.
Okay, very quickly to add that in Kenya, that was actually the easiest part of the whole job, because I said in my slide, no water, no oil. Water is critical to the whole project, and it happens to be in one of the driest parts of Kenya. So this was, as I say, the easy part of the job. Higher management are backing the initiative fully.
Thanks all. I just disconnected there for 1 second, but I'm back with you. And I think we have now reached the end of our time. So massive thanks to everyone on the line. That's Jan, Godfrey, Richard, Anna-Marie, and Jackie, who have all worked really hard pulling this together today. And also a big thanks to all the participants for their time today joining. We've recorded this webinar and we'll make it available on the IPECA Vimeo page should you wish to listen again or share it with any of your colleagues. And please let me know if you'd like any of the slides. And a reminder to please now go and fill out the survey on water stewardship for us. If you have any follow-up questions or proposals for future webinars, please do let us know. But for now, thanks very much and see you next time. Bye.